Modern.
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 We're prepping for a voyage.
Modern.
The force of an old-fashioned equals whiskey mass times bitters acceleration.
Why don't you make that a double?
Modern Bar Cart.
What's shaking, cocktail fans? Welcome to episode 136 of the Modern Bar Cart podcast. I'm your host, Modern Bar Cart CEO Eric Kozlik. Thanks for joining me for this interview episode where we track down the best and brightest minds in the spirits and cocktail world so that we can share their secrets with you. This time around, I catch up with my friend H. Joseph Ehrmann, proprietor of the legendary San Francisco bar Elixir and one of the driving forces behind Fresh Victor, an awesome fresh juice-based cocktail mixer line that's been making waves in the beverage community. We dig into a whole bunch of awesome stuff during this episode, some of it ancient history, and some of it completely groundbreaking. But before we get in too deep here, let's do the right thing and give you the chance to make yourself a drink. This episode's featured cocktail is the Pamplemousse au Poivre, the drink that H created to win the cocktail branch of the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. To make it, you'll need 2 ounces of good quality mezcal, 1 ounce Giffard Pamplemousse Rosé, which is a pink grapefruit liqueur, a half ounce of Marie Brizard Poivre de Sichuan, which is a Sichuan pepper liqueur. We talk about this at length in the episode, and H kind of shares his hacks on how he makes it. A half ounce of lemon juice, and 1 dash of grapefruit bitters. If you don't have those, you can always substitute a dash or 2 of our embitterment orange bitters. Combine these ingredients in a cocktail shaker with ice, shake until well chilled, strain into a stemmed cocktail glass, and garnish with a lemon zest cone filled with pink peppercorns. I love this drink because it's very balanced, using intense flavors like smoke from the mezcal, grapefruit, and peppercorns, and then integrating them into a classic sour cocktail. It showcases H's background, but it also advances the conversation about using fresh ingredients to jazz up tried and true drink formats. If you head on over to Elixir, H's bar in the Mission District of San Francisco, you can try this cocktail for yourself. So, now that you're well hydrated, let's set our sights on this excellent interview. Some of the topics H and I discuss include how he combined his culinary art, general contracting, business administration, and PR skills to resurrect one of San Francisco's oldest and most storied bars. Some reflections on his career so far, from winning cocktail competitions to becoming a certified Cognac and rum educator to being featured on the cover of the New York Times. The difference between generalists and specialists in the spirits and cocktail space, and why the best generalists are very often secret specialists and insatiable learners. What it's like to launch a juice-based mixer company focusing on his latest project, Fresh Victor. Some thoughts on spirits judging, in particular what he and I are excited about at this year's ADI Annual Judging of Craft Spirits. The crazy reality of being able to trace a barrel shortage through the years simply by listening to your palate, and much, much more. This is one of a few little impromptu interviews I managed to get during this year's American Distilling Institute judging event. Over the next few weeks, you'll get to hear little snippets and impressions from a bunch of different folks I had the opportunity to learn from, and how they're all working to help build the spirits and cocktail industry of tomorrow. I'm super stoked to bring you these interviews, and I'm even more stoked that I just have the opportunity to sit in the room with these folks and soak up the knowledge and experience that they have to offer. So please sit back and enjoy this really, really fun conversation with my friend, H. Ehrmann. H, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So can you introduce yourself just generally to our listeners and tell us a little bit about where you're coming from in this big, bold industry of ours?
I have been in the business for a long time. I started around 1986 as a line cook in New Jersey, on the Jersey Shore. My parents had bought a house at the beach on Long Beach Island, and I went to the restaurant on our street to get a job and was hired to be a bus boy. But when I showed up, the front of house manager wasn't there, and the chef who was a guy from New Orleans named Duke LeCicero, and he said, Mike's not here. You want to learn how to cook? And I was like, sure.
Nice.
I was like 16, and he took me under his wing, and I learned how to cook and cooked alongside him. I was 16. He was probably 21 or something. He and Mike that he mentioned had just gotten out of CIA, and prior to that, Duke had worked for Paul Prudhomme in New Orleans, and Duke went on to open his own restaurant in the French Quarter, which I think he just shut last year, actually. And we connected many years later in 2007. At Tales of the Cocktail, I did a spirited dinner with him at his restaurant, along with Francesco Lafranconi and Alan Katz from New York, and the three of us did this dinner, and it was the first time I'd seen Duke in 20 years, and it was great. And so anyway, in between all that time, I worked in bars and restaurants all through high school and college, and after college, I mostly cooking positions, and then after college, I moved to Vail, Colorado, and I started working as a cook in a restaurant there, and worked my way from the kitchen to the bar, and started bartending. I was there for 4 seasons, and then I went to get my MBA at Thunderbird in Arizona, and I bartended all through school at the pub on campus until I finished my MBA. Got a job in Madrid, stayed in Spain for a couple of years.
Oh, wow.
And working in PR. I was working in a small PR firm. And then I came back to the States and got a job in technology during the dot-com boom on the East Coast in Washington, D.C. A year later, I got recruited to Silicon Valley, moved out here, and that job lasted like 9 months. And here I was with all this MBA debt, and did not want to leave California. I had been trying to get to California forever, so I wound up doing a lot of things, one of which was bartending to make rent, and was the thing that was most consistent money. And after 6 months of bartending for someone else, I said, screw tech. This is not the industry that I really love. I'm loving being back in the bar business. This is the thing I know and love. Why not put my MBA to this industry? And so I quit everything I was doing at the time, which I had like 4 jobs, and I just wrote a business plan, raised capital, found a bar and bought it, and opened Elixir in 2003, November 21st, 2003. And it was a rundown old bar that when I walked into it at first, I said, these people don't know what they're selling. This is a real deal old West saloon. And I was fortunate enough to get the real estate as well. And so I shut it down for a couple months and stripped it down, fixed things. I'd like to say I restored it. I didn't renovate it. I brought it back to its Victorian kind of glory and made it a saloon where it had not been a saloon in theme for years and years. And over the years since then, about 16 and a half years, I've had it now that I've done lots of research. So I know the whole story, and that could be an entire separate show.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because San Francisco, I would say right now, San Francisco is one of the, let's call it the big 5 cocktail cities in the U.S. You could argue about whittling that number down, I'm sure, but it's certainly one of the big 5 cocktail cities in the U.S. And I think it's, alongside New York, one of the 2 cocktail cities that has the richest, deepest history. All right, maybe with New Orleans. We'll put New Orleans in there as well. But San Francisco is so far away from New York and New Orleans. It's on a completely different coast. It's on a completely different, as far as, like, we're talking 19th century when the cocktail first comes of age, it's a completely different supply stream. There's different people, there's different ingredients, the Pisco punch, right? San Francisco is so unique in that respect.
And my bar goes back to that.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that. We don't need to make a full episode on it, but I feel like it would be a sin to pass that up completely.
Yeah. The Elixir sits a block from the Mission Dolores Church, which was founded in 1776. And with all my research, I've dated it back to 1858. And that's documented existence of a saloon on that corner going back over 161 years. And the first saloon that was there burned down in 1906 along with the rest of the city. The saloon that was rebuilt is what I have now in 1907. And the guy that did that, Patrick J. McGinnis, he was the longest running proprietor from 1858 to 1893 to 1933. He was 40 years.
Wow.
So 13 years in when it burned down, and he's the one that had the new building built. And he contracted an architect who turned out to be one of the most famous architects in California history. His name was Brainerd Jones, who built Carnegie Libraries and the Petaluma or the Sebastopol train station and a lot of real big buildings and cool stuff. And so the history is, it's a cool building. The bar is beautiful. Where that neighborhood back in Gold Rush days, and if it was 1858, I can date it to. It's possible that it went longer, but no longer than 1848, because prior to the Gold Rush, there were only about 500 people in that area, maybe 5,000 people in the entire peninsula, and it went up to 100,000 within a year or two. Like it went crazy, and so it's a very historic location, and it's just cool to have a piece of that history. It's something that you're standing in my bar and you're like, think about all of those years and all the people that have drank and that square footage and the things that have happened.
Yeah, exactly. So right now, can you talk a little bit about what your concept is and maybe how that's similar and or different to what it might have looked like when it was a saloon?
I worked with everything that I had. I stripped it all down. I had a contracting background as well through my 20s when I was working in restaurants after college. I was also contracting. I built a lot of homes and a lot of renovations, a lot of finishes mostly. And so I stripped all the wood down. I repaired the walls. I repaired the floor, and the wainscoting around the walls was covered with about 11, 12 coats of paint. Ironically, the last coat of paint was a faux wood finish. And I looked at it and I said, I know there's good wood underneath that. And I stripped it down, and sure enough, there was beautiful old redwood. And
no kidding.
The bar and the back bar actually predate the building. There's a plaque on the bar that says San Francisco Store and Office Fixture Company, which was a company across the street and up the block, which was the address on the plaque is a pre-1906 address. So in other words, after they rebuilt the block in 1907, that address was different, the different buildings.
From the earthquake.
Yeah. And so, and when I looked in the business records, that company moved off 16th Street after 1907. So this bar came from that store, but before the earthquake in 06. So it's a late 19th century bar, solid mahogany, no burn marks on it. The bar matches the back bar. And so that's beautiful. That's an amazing piece. And so I put in lighting that is period style that wasn't there. But other than that, I really just kind of shined it up. I cleaned it up, and the decor that I put in there and the colors and the lighting and the things that I took, I guess design touches that I put on were fashioned to be Victorian and old saloon. Whereas the bar that I bought was a rundown shithole.
Yeah.
And it had been many things over the years. It was a merchant marine dive bar called Swedes from 1965 to 1985. It was a gay Latino club from 85 to 89 called La Bandita. And then it was bought in 89 out of court because the owner died of AIDS, and his family had disowned him, and so Bill Carlson bought it out of court, and Carlson owned a number of bars around the city, and he called it Jack's Elixir Bar and turned it into a beer bar with 62 taps, and in a bar that has a fire code of 49 people. So
interesting.
It was the 90s beer wave, and
yeah,
very different.
So what are you primarily serving? Like if I were to walk off the street into Elixir today, what would I see?
A lot of whiskey. We have over 600 bottles of whiskey around. Over the years, as I continued to collect whiskey, I just kept building shelves, and so there's shelves that surround it, 360 up above on the back bar. So lots of great spirits as well. The other categories have nice little boutique collections, but it's predominantly whiskey. We have 16 taps, and so I keep every tap's a different style of beer, and I try to keep everything pretty local and rotating when possible. And then, of course, kind of made my name on the cocktails back when nobody was making good cocktails, and I started doing that around 2005 and 6, and that's when it started to get noticed, and that kind of what put us on the map was my cocktails back then.
So I was in San Francisco prior to this event that we're both judging at here in Tiburon, and I've been through different parts of the San Francisco cocktail scene throughout the past couple of years, and there's a very distinct tiki vibe in some places. In other places, I notice a more upscale, almost what I would say is verging on fussy cocktails. Where do the cocktails on your program right now kind of fit into that? Like, what kind of drinks are you making? Do you have any examples of your favorite or your best-selling drinks on the menu right now?
When I basically by 2005, my bar was not doing great. It was doing okay, and I was a few years into it, and I was like, I'm either gonna make some dramatic changes and make this thing really make some money, or I'm going to get out and go do something else. I don't want to just kick this around. So I made some dramatic changes, and I leaned on my culinary background. So I started, I bought a whole bunch of books, and I started making classics and brought back some stuff that I believed in. Like, I loved rye whiskey, and nobody was working with rye whiskey. And I started doing a Sazerac before people knew what a Sazerac was. But I also started muddling all kinds of stuff, and pulling out a food processor and juicer and stuff, and started making produce-driven culinary style cocktails. And there were a few other people in town that were doing that. And back then we sat at each other's bars and we talked about it. And I mean, there were probably 15 of us. I remember when I joined the USBG, I was number 16. I was the member number 16 for the San Francisco chapter, and we had maybe 3 chapters in the whole country. I think it was us, LA, and Vegas.
Wow.
And I got very involved with that. And so I just kept making these kinds of drinks, and I started getting press for it. And to this day, I would say our original list, which hovers around 8 drinks regularly, are culinarily driven, fresh produce and seasonal. I, for a number of years, changed the menu 6 times a year. And it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And we don't do that anymore. We do maybe 2 to 3 menus a year now. And right now, I guess we're going to be launching a new menu next week. Some of the drinks that'll carry over are my Pamplemousse au Poivre, which that and the Murphy Sour are the 2 drinks that I won the San Francisco World Spirits cocktail competition the last 2 years in a row. I won that, and
wow.
It's coming up again next month. So hopefully I'll have a 3-peat. Thanks. The Pamplemousse is I use Del Maguey Vita with some Giffard Pamplemousse, and I make a pepper cordial I call Elixir de Poivre, which was kind of a funny story. It was made. It's based on a Marie Broussard essence de poivre that they sent me a bottle of this liqueur and said, this letter, we love your work. We'd love to see what you can do with this. Please make a cocktail and send us the recipe. So that year, and I've been a judge at the San Francisco competition for a long time now, and they sent us this thing saying, hey, we're going to start this new competition amongst the judges to create a cocktail. And this year we're going to use this mezcal, which was Banez, that won the best mezcal the year before. Can you make a cocktail with this and compete with each other? And so I was like, all right, I'll play around with this. And I had this cordial that they had sent me, and I had this new Pamplemousse, and I was like, I was thinking Paloma and agave and
right,
and
yeah.
kind of spinning on that. And I played around with it, and I used that Elixir de Poivre or that Essence de Poivre. And I made this drink, and it's got a little lemon juice and the pepper and grapefruit and mezcal. And I made like a little cone with a lemon zest and filled it with pink peppercorns and placed it on the rim of the glass. And it was beautiful and tasty. And I won the competition. And then I got all this press for winning the competition. And I contact Marie Bazard, and I'm like, hey, I want to. You asked me to make something. This is what I made. Look, here's the press. Look what I did. And they wrote back. They're like, oh, sorry, we're not going to sell that in the United States.
Oh, no.
And I was like, why the hell did you send this to me?
Oh, man. So I'm guessing that you just...
I reverse engineered it, and I make it out of a 120 proof vodka. And I make, I like what I make even better. So we make that in-house now. And I just saw on Instagram, there's a restaurant in Brooklyn that made a version of it, and they put their own spin on it, cutting the sugar and increasing the Sichuan pepper, and so that's our bestseller. But I have a great team of people right now that have amazing talent and great palates, and they're also putting great drink. I'm trying to make the menu more about them and their drinks than mine at this point, and they're putting out some really fabulous stuff. So I'm excited for this new menu that we're about to put out.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that kind of occurs to me as we have this conversation, and as I map on what you're saying about cocktails and your approach to developing flavors, and put that against your past and your history, it seems to me like you're a generalist. You wear many hats, or have historically worn many hats, and you use those skills in whatever current role you're in. You draw on those various skills, whether that's contracting or your time spent with that the New Orleans chef with the crazy name. You take these things and you roll them into whatever you're doing, and I appreciate that because I consider myself a generalist. How do you think about generalizing or specializing in either the cocktails or the spirits world? Because I think that could also very well apply to what we're here doing with spirits. What do you think about generalists versus specialists?
Well, I've been in the business a while. I've done a lot of things, and I guess being a generalist was initially came out of my vision for what Elixir was to be, which was a neighborhood bar. I want, my goal was open 365, everyone's welcome, something for everyone. I built marketing programs to drive traffic every day of the week, different hours of the day, from sports on the TV to pub quiz on Tuesday. I was like, yeah, we are going to be a little bit of everything to everybody instead of being just a specific kind of bar. But then the cocktails got really popular, and suddenly we were a mixology bar when nobody knew what mixology was, and that was great because, like I said, it got us attention, it got us press and people in the door. I got a photo and a cocktail on the cover of the New York Times, and although it was an obscure cocktail and it was delicious, people would come in like, I saw that and I want that drink, and they would have it, and they'd be like, okay, they'd have one of those, and they'd be like, okay, I'll have a Budweiser and a shot of whiskey, and they'd stay, and that's where you make your money.
Yeah.
And so, I rode that out for a while, and as I was doing that, and it got into, I don't know, maybe 2009, 2010, I started to see like the work that I was doing out on the road as a consultant for Square One Organic Spirits. I was the brand ambassador, and I helped develop a lot of those products and flavor profiles, and worked with Allison, the owner, traveling the country. I got to train a lot of bartenders literally back then on just how to squeeze a lime and make simple syrup, and talk about freshness and green business and organics. And when I bring that back to the bar, I realize they're listening. All of a sudden, cocktail bars are, everything's picking up, and the press is getting bigger and bigger. And I was like, I don't want to fight this fight forever. So I had already built up a really big tequila collection because I love tequila, but I realized around 2006 or 7 that people associated whiskey more with this saloon than tequila. So I shifted into whiskey, and I started collecting whiskey. And as we got into 10, 11, 12, we started getting recognition for being a great whiskey bar. And that's what I was kind of leaning on, being as a bar and a business specializing on whiskey while still having great cocktails and being known for making great cocktails. And that kind of has ridden through to today. At the same time, as a consultant, I got other opportunities. I was invited to become a Cognac educator with the BNIC. And so I went to France and I studied Cognac, and they hired me and I started teaching bartenders about Cognac. And then the Authentic Caribbean Rum Program reached out and contacted me and said, hey, we're going to bring this rum education program from Europe over to the States, and we'd like you to be the West Coast educator. And then I got to go to the Caribbean and study rum and come back and teach people about rum. And and all this time I had been invited to San Francisco and be a judge. And with ADI here, I've been a judge over a decade. And I was judging the Los Angeles competition. I was judging spirits. So as much as I guess I've become even more of a generalist because I've taken time to dive into each specific spirit. Yeah. And study them, that I've gotten an expertise in so many different spirits, and I can talk about all of them. So in that way, I'm a bit of a generalist. But when I come here, I judge whiskey. Right. And when we go to San Francisco, we rotate the panels, and even though I'll be sitting with people that have their specific kind of specializations, we'll do whiskey to gin to baijiu in a day, and it's a different type of competition.
Yeah. It seems like being good at being a generalist, and I'm kind of putting you out here as obviously the proof's in the pudding. You are a successful generalist. Yeah. It seems like that takes patience, right? Because what you're saying is, no, you can't just be a generalist and paint with broad brushstrokes and expect instant success. It seems like your definition of generalism, at least as far as this very diverse spirits and cocktail world is concerned, involves having the patience to take the deep dives and the willingness to sit with the specialized aspects of the trade, and then come up for air and look around and see what else is out there. Right.
Yeah. It's a long view. You gotta play the long game.
Yeah.
And I think, when I decided to open the bar, and I did have some thought that it might be temporary for a few years or something, because I did have this, I went to Thunderbird, which is this international MBA program, and everybody at Thunderbird is all about global business. And back then, even then, not many people were doing global business when I got my Thunderbird MBA. And I had this grandiose vision of traveling the world and working in multiple languages and being in this big corporate environment. And when I lost that job, and there were no more jobs. I mean, the dot-com crash here was so much worse than 2008 or anything. It was the worst thing to happen here in the last 20 years, for sure. I mean, there's so many people unemployed. There was like a 2-week wait list for outbound one-way U-Haul rentals. So I was just like, all right. When I made the decision to open the bar, I said, this is what I want to do. I dipped my toe in corporate, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the tech industry as much as I liked the travel and the pay and all that. I just didn't really like it. It wasn't me. So I was like, I'm gonna have to build this and to be happy and go long term. And so it's funny. I have a product company called Fresh Victor. We're doing fresh juice based cocktail mixers, and I'm getting the opportunity to work with some really amazing seasoned veterans in consumer products and building a company, people who have taken companies to great success. And I've been at the helm of my own thing for so long now that it's great to work with people that I've got some great new mentors. And one of them sent an article just recently about grit and what grit is and what it takes. How do you focus on grit and what does it mean in your career? And it's just that. It's that sticking to it. It's the long game. Like if it's all going to work out if you just keep working toward that goal. And I feel when he sent that, I read that, I'm like, that's what I've been doing. Like, yeah. Everything is on this straight line associated with booze and drinks. I mean, I say booze, which sounds negative, but spirits. It's craft, it's culture, it's commerce, and everything that comes off of it. Everything I do, from training bartenders in hospitality and service and spirit production to judging things or creating products or just being in the bar and being a bartender. Like, I love all of it, and it's great that I've built all these little branches off of it.
Yeah, it was neat, kind of like extrapolating that to what we're here doing with these spirits and judging them. Somebody at my table today, we were judging these barrel-aged gins, and they were very different, so we were asking about like what we were trying to consult like the ADI guidelines on what a barrel-aged gin is, to see what we should and should not be either praising or docking the spirit for. And one of the comments that somebody made was like, well, just by sitting here having this conversation, we're contributing to what this category looks like. And, I think that's, to me, that really made me take a step back and appreciate the privilege of what it is to be here and have that conversation. So I definitely agree with you with what you're saying of like, taking that through line and sticking to it and having that be kind of your contribution to the entire industry.
And I've been with ADI for many years now, and I've seen ADI grow from when there were very few craft distillers in the country. And Bill Owens asked me to come up and teach a whiskey mixology class to some people that were taking a whiskey class up here in Marin County, and that was my introduction to them. And I got to meet all of those people, and in that group was Wes Henderson, who now has Angel's Envy, and like through that I met his dad. I had met his dad when he came to my bar to show me some Suntory whiskey, but
nice.
It was just goes back to that. And now you look at what ADI is now and where craft distilling is now. And it's just been a forward trajectory.
For sure. Now let's talk about Fresh Victor, because this is, I think when you were introducing yourself, you said, this is what's taking up all of my time. I have some sympathy for what it takes to create a consumer packaged goods brand. It's not easy. There's a lot of middle people between you and the end consumer. There's a lot of crunching numbers and formulating and reformulating flavor profiles. Take us through when you got the idea right through to now and all these beautiful flavors that you've created.
Well, actually, it wasn't me. The founder is my friend Ken, and Ken and I met about 20 years ago when he was selling and importing a tequila brand called Amate, and he and I met, and he had hired me to run some cocktail bars for promoting his brand, and we worked together through that a bit. And some years later, he started a new tequila brand called Republic. He was part of that team that created Republic Tequila in Texas, and he called me up again to help him, where he had this idea of making these mixers. And I went and visited some juice factories with him, and we worked on formulas, and I created some recipes. And he built this, I think they had 4 different products. He built it up to a good volume as a consumer product in Texas. Then he and his partners sold that company, and he came back to California and said, let's do this thing as its own company. And I was like, I'm in, and so we started building it along with some other friends, and I contributed in the early years to some ideas and early branding and development concepts. And they went on, and Ken was out doing tastings and consumer tastings at supermarkets and stuff, and lugging his bag around, and he really built it up for quite a while. And then just within the last 2 years, 2 to 3 years or so, I got back in more involved with it. So Ken's been at it for 6-7 years, and just this past year is when I really turned it on and got more involved in development and account development, and now it's a small team of us at the core, and we have 7 flavors that are really we have a lemon sour and a lime sour. The lime is lime agave, and the lemon sour is fresh lemon and cane sugar, and we use only organic cane and organic agave.
And these would be like sour mixes for like your classic Collinses and daiquiri style drinks, right?
Exactly, yeah. And beyond that, we have our pineapple and ginger root. We have a prickly pear or cactus pear and pomegranate. We have a cucumber lime, a 3 citrus and mint. Looking over at the line here, what I'm missing. And we're growing into. We got 2 more flavors coming up. We're going to do a ruby red grapefruit and sea salt, which we're fine tuning right now, and we've got a strawberry and lemon. And it was built as a consumer product, but now we're actually more focused on the trade. We killed the consumer line for a while, and where, in the consumer line, we're selling it at 32 ounces, which was 10 cocktails. Everything across the board pretty much mixes at a 2-to-1 ratio.
Yep.
On a very simple level. I've tweaked and played with all of our products to create recipes that really work with our products on a professional level. So that some of them are less than, they're different ratios. They come in a 2-pack of 64-ounce bottles in a gallon case. And we have national distribution with Cisco and PFG and US Foods. And we're working on national account placements and high volume business that's helping high volume accounts provide a fresh, consistent product on a regular basis throughout all of their venues. And that's something that really has not been available prior to this.
Right.
So that's kind of the need we're meeting on a business level.
Right. Yeah. And I love this. I've actually been thinking a lot about this because you walk into a casino, for example, and I know that casinos are, part of your client base. You walk into, a busy, kind of like a big rooftop bar at a giant hotel resort, and you have to lower your expectations.
Yeah, we've all been there.
You just have to. And it's funny because even if you're a person who really loves and goes out of their way for good craft spirits, well-made cocktails, it's something that you do on autopilot no matter what. You see the venue, you get a feel for the place, and something in your brain kicks into autopilot. You adjust your expectations and you take a shitty drink. Yep. For the most part. And that's why I've been talking to people about this and really I've been thinking a lot about this very situation. And I think it's great to be able to take something and make it just a little bit better. You're not changing what these bars are. And on the flip side, you're not creating super efficient robot bartenders who can spit out the perfect old fashioned but are robots. Yeah. Right. So you're taking the bar game. You're saying, okay, I recognize your limitations. I accept your limitations, but let's take this one half step higher, and that can mean a lot when you are a consumer and you walk into that and you're expecting, apple pucker or something terrible in a sour mix, and you get something and you take that first sip. And you go, oh wow, this is actually enjoyable. Yeah, and for even seasoned veterans, that's a big leap when they get that, because we go in, and even today, knowing how many well-trained bartenders and good programs there are, I mean, a go-to for most people is a Negroni because it's equal parts and it's easy and it's hard to mess up, but somehow people still mess it up. Right. So something like this, what we're trying to do is say, I made my name in fresh produce-driven cocktails, and I know what it takes to cost out and make something that is consistent and delicious for throughout the year on a 365 business. And I'm just a little 1,000 square foot bar. And you try to take that and make it consistent and delicious across multiple units, the same recipe. Not only differences and variations on produce quality and pricing, but bartender skill level and training and execution. And then there's so many different variables. And that's what we aim to kind of take off the table and make things easier and more cost and work efficient for the restaurant or bar, but also higher quality and more enjoyable for the customer. Absolutely. I know we've both been judging here today, and I want to be respectful of your time, but I wanted to do one follow-up on that, and then kind of maybe talk a little bit about just give a quick little state of the union of maybe a couple things that we saw here at ADI that were interesting. The one follow-up I had on the Fresh Victor point that you were just saying is, talking about the Negroni. Well, it's easy. And some places have taken to batching these Negronis based on, what they know about relatively how much traffic is going to be going through that bar at a given time. I think that's great. And I think the cool thing about batched cocktails being in vogue right now is that it's a perfect place to use these fresh fruit juice blends, because when you're batching a cocktail, one of the things you're doing is you're trying to make something easy, but also something where there's a little bit of complexity. And you've even made that just a little bit easier with some of these mixes, because you've got some complexity in there. It's not just limes that you've put through your industrial juicer.
Yeah.
You've got lime, and you're talking about this ruby red grapefruit and salt, which can make all the difference in a Paloma.
Yep.
Right? So I really like the batchability of what you're offering too, because not only does it work if you grab it out of the fridge and do an individual pour, but you can also batch with them. And I think batching has become increasingly important in bars these days.
Oh, absolutely. I've been doing experiments at my own bar on a kegged cocktail, just running a 5-gallon corny keg on a wide variety of things that I've put through that works great. And then I also have a catering company, and with our beverage catering, we do large festivals, which we've started to get into. And just this past fall, we ran all the bars for the Oakland Pride Festival, and we had 6 bars and a couple of frozen machines at every bar, and we went in and batched about 6,000 cocktails in about 2.5 hours and got them out to 6 bars and served 150,000 people. And it's so quick and easy. And I have built all these like batching formulas for using this stuff that you literally just how many jugs of our stuff and how many bottles of booze, and you've got something that's quick, easy, delicious, and servable and profitable. And that alone is a game changer. When I start seeing people using it in that way, I'll be really happy. For sure.
And I think for that reason and for many other reasons, it's a really valuable contribution to the market. So definitely looking forward to see it make its way out east. I know when you're on when you're on one of the coasts, it tends to take a little while for it to reach the other one, but I'm certainly looking forward to seeing Fresh Victor out east, and just really impressed by what you've been able to put together with that.
Thanks.
What has been fun this year at ADI so far for you?
Every year as a whiskey judge, what's been really fun is having watched the American craft whiskey industry grow over the last decade, from super nascent stage to now, where we've seen many distilleries learn lessons about just basic lessons about production. In the early days, there was stuff coming out of distilleries that was just, to be frank, garbage. It was scary, and we judged it, and we one of the great things about this competition is that we give feedback to the distillers. We don't just give them a medal or a grade or whatever. We give them written feedback. And I'd like to think that a lot of those distillers took that feedback to heart and really learned something and did something with it. We've got an amazing group of judges here with some really highly technical people, distillers and analysts, and I've learned so much sitting alongside some of these people. And as I was telling you earlier, my first time judging with this was Dave Pickerel was the judging director, and Lincoln Henderson was there, and Dave Shurick, and I was tasting with Hubert Germain Robin and learning about brandy, and I just walk away from this week or several days every year with all kinds of new knowledge. And Nancy Fraley now is just a joy to work with, and she teaches me so much every time we do this. And there's just so many. I could name them all.
Yeah.
So that to me is the best thing, is how much I actually learn by coming here to do this.
Give us that little brief vignette about the fermentation that you told me earlier.
Oh, and I sat down with Hubert and Flavia Andislova and I think Alain Royer were judging brandy, and I loved brandy back then. I didn't have as much of an entree into it as I ended up getting later. And actually, Alain took me on a personal tour a few years later of Armagnac. But anyway, I sat at that table, and I was on a break because I had palate fatigue, and I was just watching them judge, and it was complete silence for people. I don't know that a lot of people understand, like when you're judging spirits, it's can be rather boring because it's super quiet and everybody's into their glasses and taking notes, and then until we all come together and talk about it.
There's a lot of making faces.
Yeah.
There's a lot of faces, but yes, silence.
And all of a sudden they started reviewing whatever they were tasting at the time, and it got to Hubert, and Hubert said, something went wrong in the fifth day or the third day of fermentation. And I just looked at him, my jaw just dropped, and I was like, this is just another level to be able to taste something and know what the fault was and when it happened. And that was like my first introduction to that. And now that's like, now I talk like that.
Yeah, I was sitting next to Rob today from Blue Coat or New Liberty Distillery, and I rated something rather highly. I was in, and it's okay. Sometimes when you're judging things, there are outliers, and there are different reasons for being an outlier on a panel. And it's not always a bad thing, because this feedback is getting back to the distillers. And sometimes someone is being a consumer advocate when other folks are being technical advocates. And there's value in both. So I don't mean to imply that I was wrong, although I probably was in this case. But I reviewed something. And then Rob went off on like a bunch of like technical flaws. Not only did he have like the chemical name for the compounds that he was sensing, but he was able to isolate very specific procedural places where this probably went wrong. And to a distiller, that's a treasure trove. You pay a couple $100 to submit some spirits to ADI, and you get essentially a sniper to come in and from the other side of the country point out what's going wrong in your process. I mean, that's hugely, hugely valuable. And I can't say enough about how much I admire that. Now, not my skill set. I tend to be more of a consumer advocate, but anyway, we digress.
I always say I'm not a scientist. I'm a bartender who hangs out with scientists.
That's fair.
So I've through the process of osmosis, I have absorbed a lot of scientific knowledge over the years. Yeah, and I continue to.
Well, and you learn a lot of science through application in the kitchen too. Yeah. You mess up a dish or a preparation enough times, you do the work to figure out what you messed up, and you absorb that. So I think there's something to be said for being in the kitchen and behind the bar with produce and with stuff. But so moral of the story, the whiskey scene has certainly evolved. We're getting some more mature products, and obviously that's a byproduct of whiskey having time to sit in barrels. But what else is going on besides just the fact that it has had time to mature on oak?
It's interesting, actually. There's so much product now. We used to have, I think originally we had one whiskey panel and then two, and now we've got three because there's a lot of whiskey coming through. And 5-8 years ago, everybody that wanted to make whiskey was making vodka, gin, unaged rum, and white whiskey or moonshine or whatever they're going to call it. So because everybody's trying to get something to market to sell and get some cash flow going. And so we had a lot of that, and it was like, that is mostly subsided now, and people have had whiskey in the barrel. And one of the things we're seeing, I think, a lot of is that whiskey that went in the barrel 4 to 8 years ago or so, when there was this big rush of people that wanted to make whiskey, there was a barrel shortage. And so a lot of barrels that went out, and a lot of people that were buying barrels were green wood or unseasoned wood or kiln dried or not the best wood for barrels. And so we, in the coming years, of course, they continue to push stuff out at 6 months or 12 months or 18 months onto the market, an 18-month whiskey or even a 6-month whiskey. And because they want to sell something, they want to learn some lessons and all that. And we could see the green, you could taste the green wood, you can smell it, you can, it's obvious. And now there's a 5-8-year-old product that was put down in that, and there's still some hints of it in there, and we can understand like why you can't, that was what was available. But and I'm seeing when I visit distilleries and I taste other stuff that's even younger now, actually sometimes more promise in a 2 to 4 year whiskey, and some of those that were put in a bigger way. That was one of my biggest takeaways the last couple of days, is in the stuff that I tasted. And this year I tasted mostly bourbon. some years, that's up to the team here as to where they put us on a panel. Sometimes it's just all rye, or it's a mix of both. And this year I had mostly young bourbons so far, and so and I sell a lot of bourbon. In my whiskey bar of 600 bottles, I'd say 60% of that is American whiskey, because that's what's really selling. Although I am more of a malt drinker myself. I've got some amazing malts, but I got to stay on top of the American whiskeys. And
sure.
This helps me do that.
Yeah, on my panel, I've been in the gin room. The gin gin also has 3 tables. Although a lot of gin. We tend to pull some double duty. We throw in. They try and keep us from getting. I wouldn't say palate fatigue, but you might say juniper fatigue.
Yeah.
By threading into our flights various other things, whether that's vodkas occasionally, some ready-to-drink things. I had a vermouth today.
Oh, nice.
I had a really interesting, and this was the flight where I kind of got into a little bit of trouble, a flight of beer schnapps, which was really interesting. And I think we were all a little bit out of our element with that, because it's such a category that is very alien to the United States. And to be honest, we didn't have a whole lot of experience judging it. We could really do a good job with the sensory analysis, but there were still some hanging questions as to like the category, the trueness. So the one that we thought was really promising, we are actually sending off to review, and we're lucky enough to have some folks here from Germany who have a little bit more experience with that. So our hope is that if we can get some people with more experience in that category, we can get them to either confirm or refute our set of findings. The other thing that I found interesting is I had several flights of barrel-aged gins yesterday, and I'm happy to say that there is some terrible stuff out there, but also some very good stuff out there.
I've always liked that concept.
Yep. So that was fun for me. Yesterday was rough for me. We had at least on my panel, a largely disappointing day of kind of rushed American gins that were a little bit less promising than I would hope for. I'm from the DC area, and we're lucky to have a bunch of distilleries that do a great job with their gins, because we're in a gin market, and I think that really elevates the level of conversation about what gin should be in our market. So I was a little bit disappointed in that, but I love this competition, and I feel really privileged to be a part of this, because it gives you such a wide angle view of what's out there.
Yeah.
That I wouldn't otherwise be able to get. So
it's interesting too, where you say, like between this and some other competitions, what's great here is you see the up and coming stuff. You see where some innovation is, and where some boundaries get pushed, and where people take chances, and it's not a lot of the big name, big money brands that are entering this competition. So it's kind of a good measure of entrepreneurship and creativity within the spirits world.
And we even had the big kind of shocking bottle that is, no, it's not a bottle yet. We don't get to see the bottle until tomorrow night. But the big shocking thing is the Mare's Milk Spirit.
Oh, I didn't even hear about that.
You haven't heard about this?
Nah.
Apparently there is a Mare's Milk Spirit that was, I imagine it was on one of the wild card tables that kind of absorbs some of the categories that don't get a ton of submissions. But apparently there was a distillate made from mare's milk.
Interesting.
Very interesting to me. And they said, actually, that it was quite good, despite being a little bit odd. So, so folks, this is the kind of thing that you see at a spirits judging competition. There are some of us here who are specialists, like the folks who can tell you on what day of fermentation a brandy was flawed. And then there's some of us like H and I who we just try and pay really close attention, and we try and use our senses to speak not only on behalf of the industry, but on behalf of consumers. And I think, at least to me, that's why I really love being here. So,
and that's the nice thing about the conversation, having multiple judges on one thing, is you've got people who are technical, who actually make the stuff, and you've got people who, like me, who sell it. I buy it and sell it, and I'm a filter, but it gets to the public if I decide that I'm going to sell it, and me and many others. And then
Right.
there are writers who decide whether or not they're going to write about it and get the word out. And so
Exactly.
we all sit in a circle and say, I like this for this reason, or I don't like it for that reason. And we come to a consensus.
It was interesting. I tended to be like, if you compare, for example, that beer schnapps flight against our ready to drink flight that we had today, the beer schnapps flight, I was giving these things beautiful high. I was giving golds and silvers on this beer schnapps flight, and everyone else was a lot more hesitant. Now you flip that on its head with the ready to drink flights that I did today, and I'm personally extremely sensitive to artificial flavors, especially sweeteners, because I did not grow up on eating any diet or any of those fake sugars. And I'm also very sensitive to artificial flavors because I make bitters, and I taste a lot of bitters that are made with flavor extracts, and I know exactly what real flavor extracts taste like. So I'm very sensitive to those two things. And when they were saying crushable, great score, I would totally drink this while tubing down a river, I was like, this is totally fake tasting to me, and I can give it a balanced score. I can rate it for balance, and I can rate it for some of its qualities, but I can't give it my stamp of approval, because there are going to be some people out there like me who are just going to say this tastes artificial.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the foundation of what we're trying to do with Fresh Victor. It's like it's got to be fresh. It's got to taste like it should taste.
Yeah.
And shelf stable products that are filled with different things to keep them shelf stable tend to taste it in the end.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, H, this has been great, man. I mean, I'm really stoked to have been able to catch up with you like this.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to communicate to our listeners about your bar? How do they find your bar? If they get to visit San Francisco, how do they find Fresh Victor? Any digital stuff you want to?
Yeah, sure. Well, I guess on the handle level, Elixir is at Elixir SF, ELIXIR SF. You'd be amazed how many people misspell Elixir with an ER, which is not a word in any language.
Mm-hmm. And it's not Elix with a Y like the absolute.
Exactly. Yeah, it's
right?
Elixir. And my personal consulting stuff is my Cocktail Ambassadors company is cocktailambassadors.com, or at Cocktail Ambassadors my Instagram. Fresh Victor is at Fresh Victor Cocktails on Instagram, although we're not very active in social media right now, and our website's getting updated. We're really in kind of a pre-marketing phase even. We've got a website that's clunky and not great, and we're going to be relaunching that. And we're right now focused on getting the product out, and we're going to relaunch all the marketing a little bit later this year, which will look a lot better. But it's freshvictor.com. Yeah, and then my catering business is Elixir to Go, at Elixir to Go. So those are all the things that I do and keep building. And we're in the Mission District at 3200 16th Street, San Francisco. We're open 365. And so anybody that's in town, San Francisco is not a big town. So everything's a short car ride away.
Absolutely. So next time you're in San Francisco, go see one of the oldest bars, I would imagine, in the country. Check out some great American whiskey and some produce-driven cocktails at Elixir. And otherwise, H, thanks again, man.
Thanks for having me. Congrats on all this. This is really fun.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, there's two big things you can do for us here at Modern Bar Cart. One would be to tell your friends and family if you think they'd enjoy listening to us talk about cocktails. And if they don't download podcasts, they can always stream our episodes on their desktop directly from the show notes page at modernbarcart.com. The other thing you can do to help would be to head on over to iTunes or wherever you download your podcasts and leave us a review. 5 stars are great, but we're more interested in your feedback. And the beauty is, the more reviews we have, the easier it will be for other folks out there to learn about our show. We're trying to start a cocktail revolution here, and by spreading the word, you're helping us fight the good fight. can always reach us by emailing podcast@modernbarcart.com if you're looking for cocktail or bartending advice, or if you're a pro who would like to pull up a mic and be interviewed for all to hear. Also, definitely follow us on Instagram and Facebook @modernbarcart for cocktail porn, recipes, and entertaining tips. And keep an eye out for new product releases and special offers, which are happening all the time. We love our listeners, and we really enjoy giving you exclusive discounts and sneak peeks at our latest and greatest cocktail projects. This episode may be over, but for you, the mixological fun and adventures are just beginning, so remember, folks, drink responsibly and experiment boldly. This episode was made possible with editing and production assistance by Samantha Reed, Spirits and Cocktail Insights by H. Joseph Ehrmann, and a little bit of interview magic by yours truly. This has been a Modern Bar Cart production, copyright 2020.